Okay, good morning, everyone. Um, Welcome to the Portland Utility Board. We're meeting as a community of volunteers tasked to advise council on items related to the Water Bureau and Bureau of Environmental Services. Under Portland City Code and state law, the Portland Utility Board is holding this meeting electronically. Board members and relevant city staff are attending remotely, electronically, or by phone, and the city has made it available for the public to listen to the audio broadcast of this meeting. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments during the public comment portion of the agenda and can also provide written testimony to the board by emailing the email address on your screen. Pub believes and acts upon anti-racist principles in our meeting spaces and interactions with Pub. While every person has the right to share their personal perspective, we stand against wrongful conduct, particularly any conduct that is targeted toward people that are made vulnerable by systemic inequities. This means stepping up as a community when there is wrongful conduct and fostering a space of learning and growth. By putting our principles into action, we are active and deliberate. We speak up and speak out. Each person is empowered to maintain the culture of the Portland Utility Board, and we focus on the impacted individual or population, condemning the conduct but not the person.
My name is Amy Archer-Masters, and I'll quickly run through the guidelines. Please state your name before you speak, and if appropriate, who you're addressing or that you're addressing the group. The chat box is only viewable by the co-hosts, so Jonna Lynn and myself. Please limit chats to technical and logistical issues, including signing up for public comment, asking for assistance, or reminding us if you've been waiting to speak and have not been called on. The raise hand function is primarily used by the board. We may lower your hand once you begin speaking just to maintain the flow of conversation. During public comment periods, the public can raise their hand and will be called on when appropriate. If connecting by phone, you may need to press *9 to raise your hand. Videos may be turned on when speaking. If desired, it is not required. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking. If connecting by phone, you may need to press *6 to mute and unmute. Public comment will be taken during the comment period early in the meeting. You can sign up through chat with myself or Jonna Lynn. It's also available just prior to any formal board vote after a motion has been made and seconded by board members. The meeting is being recorded and AI companion being used.
Thanks, Amy. And speaking of meeting guidelines, I did not state my name. My name is Lauren Rosencrans. I'm co-chair of the pub. Today's meeting, we are focusing on finalizing the budget recommendations and feedback, and then we will have a conversation about recruitment. Hopefully, we will come to an agreement about how to move forward with recruitment. Then we'll end with announcements and discussing the next meeting, and then we'll adjourn. So just a moment set aside for any voting members to disclose any communications with city leadership or borough staff regarding items could relate to pub's work, any items that pub members wish to disclose.
Lauren, this is Amy. Just for the record, I just want to note that we do have quorum for the board.
Great. Thanks everybody for being here. Okay, well, I'm not hearing any comments from pub members. So we also want to have a moment for a public comment. If anybody from the public is here, please raise your hand, use the chat box if you'd like to give a public comment. Have we received anything outside of these meetings?
No, we've not received anything in advance, and I've not received any chats requesting comment.
Okay, well, okay, give it a second in case anybody's here and wants to make a note. Okay, well, if anybody has anything to add, always feel free to email the utility board. So we did have a pub meeting draft minutes distributed. Any suggestions, changes, any concerns around the minutes? They all looked good to me. So I'm not hearing any comments, so I think we can accept the minutes as is. Okay. Budget communications. Big goals for today are finalizing those recommendations for leadership, discussing the plan for how to communicate those recommendations to city leaders, perhaps having volunteers to speak at council or at a committee, and also determining next steps. We'll spend most of our meeting is going to be dedicated to finalizing this letter about the budget. It's intended to be shared with city leadership and deciding our next steps for engaging with the council. I know Amy sent out, or Jonalyn sent out that document for review, so we'll go through that and then we can work through those to discuss any edits.
So Lauren, this is Amy. I'm just going to quickly, I pulled up on screen the upcoming meetings just as a refresher before I pull up the document. So just to confirm that the Transportation and Infrastructure Council Committee will be hearing from Public Works as well as other infrastructure and fee bureaus on April 7th. And then April 16th is the date for the rate hearing before the full council. So those are a couple of the key dates on that are potential opportunities for pub to provide verbal testimony, as well as hopefully get something in writing to those council members in advance of those meetings. There's a few other key dates on the screen as well, and we can come back to those if we need to at any point. If you just give me a moment, I will pull up the document. And I think somebody had their hand raised. So did we answer your question, Kyle, or did you want to come to something before we look at the document?
Thank you. Kyle Chipman, voting pub member. Actually, it's in service and it's a framing question for the nature of the document. I was curious, and this is not meant to be exhaustive, but just like a little quick expectation setting, either for Jonah and Amy or ex officio members or people who've worked with council. Can you share how written document is distributed and disseminated to council members? Is it like it's given to staff, staff reads it, they relay it to council, all council reads it explicitly? How are written statements, how do they land? How are they landed in the past?
That's a good question, Kyle. Before I answer the question, because I'm afraid I'll forget, Cecilia also just notified me that April 7th, it sounds like the Finance Committee is also going to be hearing from Public Works. They have a session 12 to 2, so that will be a full day for everybody. So it really varies how leadership receives the information. So how it's sent to them, it's somewhat in control of, right? So my process has typically been in old days, we would print and deliver copies to offices. Now it's primarily through email, except for those who request hard copy. And it typically goes directly to council members and then whoever their chiefs or liaisons are for the specific work, as well as the bureau directors and leadership. So we are in control of who we copy it to. Each office, I don't know, because there's 12 new council members. I don't have relationship with them, and they're all still forming their staffing and how they're managing things. And so it's somewhat an evolving process. I know from in the past, each council, when we had commissioners, it varied based on personality, how into the details of reading a letter an individual elected official would get versus some who would have staff do more of the detail work and then highlight the key issues. So I think you have to plan for a wide range of audience, and either have some communications that are specifically targeted based on, what you're trying to emphasize, or just make sure it covers both, at a high level, kind of the key points, which is why, at least in the draft that we'll be looking at today, I tried to, in the first page, like cover what's most important to communicate, or, is the executive summary of what will come later. But then enough detail for both staff and elected officials who are new to what pub and the utilities do and the, logistics of it. So we've tried to cover all those bases in what's been drafted so far, but I think the audience is varied.
Thank you, Amy. That was my instinct or my hunch as well, where is it that our real shot to make an impact is in-person testimony. This written document it's there to be read, but really when we show up in person and our voices are heard and the points are made very clear, then the council members can return to this document for more detailed reference to the items that we're raising. Like this is a moment in time snapshot of our position, which is then reinforced in person. That's kind of how we approach it.
Yes, I think that's exactly right. And the other piece that becomes important is it's also a historical record to point back to, as we have in the past, at least after advocating for or against something several times, to be able to say, as was noted in, these several years worth of letters, here's an issue that we're still trying to address, because within bureaucracy, it often takes multiple shots before, something really starts to resonate. So it's a little bit of all of that. But it also can be important, at least my intention in the letter is, if we get it to the point where it can be provided early enough, is it gives some time for people to see some details, those who are more detail oriented, to then, if there's anything they want to follow up on, we'll get a little bit of a heads up about, something that resonated, or that we need to, respond to some questions before the conversation. So it helps kind of tailor what your talking points are. So it can be multi-purpose.
Thank you, Amy.
I think it's also nice to have a tangible document, right? Like something like a record of what we said, like you said, Kyle, like a snapshot in time, and then like Amy said, of being able to point to something, whether it's like soon or even down the road, right?
I have a general thought before we dive into smaller content. Just for the overall, it feels very good and comprehensive. One strategy that could be hit is just looking for there's a couple points that really jumped out as either really clean metrics or critical thoughts and ideas. And even just doing something as simple as bolding really important items can help drive the eye as it's scanning across a larger document to critical landing points, or kind of give the eye a point to rest versus a big body of text in addition to the header line. So that's just a general thought I had reviewing the document.
Great, that's helpful. So it's a little hard for me to tell which screen is sharing. Can you see the letter right now? Is that what's on your screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I will leave it open to pub as to where we want to focus. So I did, it is a long letter. So as I put in the comment is, sometimes we have tried to make things as concise as possible, because we were trying to accomplish all those varied goals and provides enough information for newer council members. It's gotten a bit longer than typical. So I do want to make sure that whatever you want to highlight the most, that we've taken the opportunity to highlight in the very beginning here. So, Jonalyn and I went back and forth and had different versions of how we started this. And so there were many ways to have done it. Any of them could have been right. So if there's something else that was more important to highlight, then certainly let us know. and we can just continue to go through the document a little bit, but we can jump to any part that you'd like. So anybody feel free to raise your hand at any time, or just unmute and begin speaking. So we did at some of the feedback that we had from prior meetings, try to provide a little bit of the history, the reminder of some of the legal foundation and the purpose of the pub. So we've tried to touch briefly a little bit on that here. Kyle, go ahead.
This is kind of like a minor formatting thought, but I think the history is helpful to open with. It would be nice if we could create the line break so that this section starts on the second page and it's contained, it's pretty darn close to a full page. But if we keep the history, like the pub's role and desire, break it to the second page and then keep the text contained within page 2 so that then page 3 is like rooted in the recommendations. Yeah, something like that. That's just like a nice formatting thing that can help tighten up the
I
feel
like
of the
I like that. And then we have like a one pager of
document.
the pub's role for, I mean, anything in the future. So I think, yeah, that's really helpful.
Great. And there is a little bit of room there if there's something else that folks wanted to reorganize, anything at the front there. So
I have sorry, this
Sure.
Lauren speaking. Just for the front matter, like you said, I think Amy, like you said, it's a long letter, and I think all of the information is really important. So I think having these goals at the front and then kind of a summary at the end, I think that's a great formatting. I wonder, do we want to add any call to action here for our goals of what we're expecting to get in terms of like feedback? Because we're saying these are our goals we want to introduce, share concern, and advocate. Um, Maybe we add something. I don't know if any of the other pub members have any thoughts on a call to action that we want to get from this letter, whether that's um, direct feedback, engagement, etc.
And because you mentioned that, I'm going to, just for a reminder for myself and as well as for others, I'm also going to scroll down to the end because we did put some, and it may be that we need to look back to what we asked for in the conclusion to identify whether some of these next steps or any of the specifics are something that we want to highlight. So I'll make note of that. And if there's something that people have specific that you want to make sure the action is called out, both at the beginning and at the end, then certainly add that now, but we can also circle back around to it. Kyle?
Shipman voting member, I agree with that instinct. And actually, in reviewing the document fully, I think it was the in the Seek Clarity on Cities' Recommitment to Equity. It was the last section about the trainee program. That actually was the only spot I saw where there was an explicit request that the pub would like to hear whether like a request from council on a point that we raise. So I think a lot of it is like really good, but it's the content is more about if we don't invest now, we're creating deeper problems later on, as opposed to these are specific requests we got, which are kind of buttoned up in the next steps section. So I'm down with the instinct. Maybe by reviewing the document, we can then return to the front and drop some very explicit calls to action. I think I agree with Lauren's call.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. I like that approach also. Because yeah, I mean having a more detailed next steps at the end is like yeah, I think that's great if we can maybe just add like a summarized call to action that's pretty explicit of like what we want out of the review, council's review. So yeah, I think Kyle's right. Let's return to that after we've reviewed the document.
Okay. So in summarizing the history, then jump into a bit of the relationship building and need for timely communication, and the challenge that it has been given how quickly things are moving. I think
This is Lauren. I personally don't have a ton of comments about this one because, I'm a newer member. But I am curious if any of the more historic members have either any comments about it or just thought it was well done. Any comments?
I guess the one thing that I'll just note is just from staff perspective that I did try to draw from prior communications and sentiments that have been shared over time as far as the importance of early communication, especially when they're talking about service reduction. So, there's a challenge in, striking the right balance between pointing out where there have been issues versus just focusing on what it is that you want. So I've tried to strike a little bit of that here, but could certainly evolve based on feedback. Kyle.
I yield to Alexis first, please.
Alexis, go ahead.
Yeah, just to say that I thought you did a really nice job with striking that balance there. That staff did a really nice job here, and especially because, right, it's a new council and a new mayor, et cetera. And so it's like acknowledging that, we've consistently emphasized the need for more information sharing and to not rush into decisions, which has been what has been, and to allow like the actual process play like to go through good process is something that we've emphasized a few times and that was not done in prior situations and around prior budget years. So I thought that this section was really good and it acknowledges, right, some of the historical things, but then also is looking very much to the future and to the new structure and council, et cetera. So just a vote of support for how this is framed.
Kyle Chipman, voting member. I'm in agreement with Alexis. I do want to share, I think as a design directive, it's really important to keep this to one page. And I would say, honestly, we probably don't have to do it together. I think Amy or Jonah, you could probably just do, if you're going to tighten up any language, I'd say that the second paragraph probably has your best opportunity because it's points that are kind of, they can be, suck out the air of a couple sentences. And especially that third and fourth paragraph are feel like the most valuable because they're forward looking. So I'd recommend keep it to one page, second paragraph, tighten up the language, or just take the air out of some of that language.
Noted that. So then the next sections move into the concern and has some subsections to it as well. So let's see. The focus is related to the proposed reduction to the rate increase and kind of the emphasis on the importance of incremental rate increases, concern about infrastructure and the maintenance investments that are required, and aligning with that. Tried to incorporate some of the language that was proposed around a false sense of cost savings for minimal impact.
Amy, we have a couple hands up. Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt you. Alexis, I think I saw yours first.
Yeah, again, I think that like the content and the key themes here are really good, and what we want to be highlighting here. So again, kudos to staff for like taking such broad ranging conversations, and capturing them so well. I'm thinking a lot about, I guess the theme of this call so far has been around like how we're presenting the information. And I'm thinking about like what do we know about like the motivations of the current council members that we can be framing these around and speaking to, and including like in the the order. So I will say that I read this and I was like, the intergenerational equity piece needs to be up at the top. But I don't know if that is the piece that's going to speak most powerfully and influentially to the council members. And so what I'm trying to, I'd love like for us to maybe like brainstorm or think about like how do we influence them to understand these like really complex issues by reading like a quick letter or like listening to our testimony and really framing it um, around things that will speak to their major concerns. And I don't have answers to that, but I do think we should probably discuss, right, like the order and the priority and making sure that all of this is really framed around what they care about the most.
Thanks for that input, Alexis. Julia, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I really appreciate what Alexis is saying, and I think, you know, we have a really large new commission, so I think there's a lot of different perspectives. So it's you can't really put all of them in the same bucket, but I know that there were a lot of kind of more system change style candidates, particularly you know, those representing East Portland, I think, are really frustrated at the historic lack of investment and services to parts of the city that were, you know, working class to poor and like forced to annex into the city, right? And like have never really gotten the full benefits of being part of the city. And that's been showing up like in the press, even as they're talking about major investments in like sidewalks and things like that for these communities that have just historically gone without like really basic, you know, community infrastructure that makes their streets safe, right? So and the lead talking point for those commissioners is we have to invest in these historically underserved communities, right? So I think that's a compelling, and even some of the commissioners that are like not from this part of the city are like supporting those efforts for similar reasons, you know, like, so I think that like, be couching this in that, like, as you said, historically, underserved and like framing it as a justice issue, like it feels really, compelling and right to me. So yeah, I just, and I think this is even true from, because like, if you look at communities in, you know, Southwest and even in the Southwest, the west side of the city, they have communities that don't have paved roads and have lack of adequate services too. This is not like a uniquely East Portland issue. And these folks who are representing districts, I think, have a stronger connection to their constituents than our previous, you know, commission form of government had. So framing it as centering the needs of their constituents is really wise and like and different than how it's been historically in the commission form of government that we've always communicated with. So I think I'm actually feeling pretty good about the framing, but I do agree with you about uplifting the justice issues and historically disadvantaged, you know, communities toward the top. But I think we're aiming in the right direction from what I can gather from the way, you know, these city council members are presenting themselves, you know, in the media and kind of how they campaigned when they were running for office.
That's really good insight. Thank you so much to both of you. What if we moved the prioritized equity and environmental justice, that entire section, to the top, so that it's like kind of like this is the why it should be important to you, and then followed by you know, the concern around the proposed reduction, so that way that's kind of like this is how it's a concern, if that makes sense.
Yeah, grounding it in the values. Yeah, no, I think that's smart. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I like that too.
great. Okay, thanks so much. Kyle, go ahead.
Voting member. Yeah, these, just a quick aside, it was the specific points I highlighted from this section. One is the sentence, pushing higher rate increases into the future will impact vulnerable communities the most. It's like one of the last sentences of this section. And also that the cost savings is only 48 cents a month. That's so low that we're not saving much. We're just shoving it off. So I'm in agreement with realigning the order in service of that. A general note for in concert with Alexis and Julia's comments, I'm also in sync with in our role as advocates for the community, not looking at it purely through the lens of making reductions to meet budget, but the impact on people and districts and communities as the budget is reduced. So I have a general question in terms of that kind of messaging and the timing that we have available ahead of the release of this letter. How much time do we have? This feels pretty fully formed, but this kind of sorry. It feels like there's some really impactful ways to approach this, but it might take time to formalize the strategy and messaging. Could we maybe look at the in-person testimonies as giving us a little bit more breathing room to really craft underserved communities or how the impacts, and there's also the breakdown, the table breakdown of the summary of, let me pull it up. It was a table-based breakdown of additional information compiled for pub budget questions. It's like as specific initiatives are either in service or out of service, how it impacts specific districts. Is that something that we can prioritize for testimonials? And then rather than having to delay the release of the letter or this written testimony? Sorry, did I say that in a jumbled way? That was like a couple thoughts trying to get out of
No,
the
that
same
totally
time.
that totally made sense. I think you always want to use testimony as an opportunity to say what you couldn't put in a letter, right? The
Sure.
examples of impact or like anecdotal, like historic information, or I don't, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I think we should, anything we feel like we weren't able to flesh out like we would really like in the letter is exactly the kind of stuff we want to strategically cover in public testimony. I like your instincts are really good.
Well, the points you're raising are valuable. I think it's an excellent strategy to take. I don't want to delay the release of this letter and the impact, especially if noise is starting to come up at all kinds of fronts on council members ahead of budget meetings. Get the letter out and then prioritize this kind of messaging for in-person testimony. That's my thought.
Yeah, exactly, Kyle. I mean, I think because the letter has a lot of the, deciding the right flow, like this is important feedback to how the pub wants to organize and place their emphasis. So we did not create talking points and the draft letter at the same time. Sometimes we've had to do that because of timing, but not in this case because I wanted to get all of your thinking on each of these areas and then be able to fine tune and start with a draft of the testimony that is hitting the right point. So that's where you decide what are the most important pieces, because then you can say, look to our letter for more information about X, Y, or Z, and you don't spend as much time on those. So that is what we would do next if we get to a point where we feel like, okay, all of the key elements are there. What are the areas that we want to really hit and get into more detail? Because, the time of testimony is also limited. So you want to make sure that you're able to, emphasize whatever is most important.
Thanks, Amy. That's really helpful. And thanks, Cal, for bringing that up. Maybe we can, it seems like we're all, for the most part, in agreement on the content of this, the bulk of this. Maybe we could look at the end with the next steps and some clear calls to action from what we want out of the letter, because that seems like where the conversation is going, unless anybody else has comments. Go ahead, Kyle.
Thank you. Just a quick one. We did lock in that refocus on long-term affordability, intergenerational equity. That's moving to the top after that opening concern with proposed reductions. We're reslotting that up to the first section, then going into support 5-year financial plans.
I think the idea was that we do the first section, pub's role, and then the second section would be the prioritize equity and environmental justice, which includes that refocus. So move that entire section to the top and then follow with the concerns. And then the letter would end with calls to action, next steps, and engagement.
The only I do like moving, especially the intergenerational equity. The only thing, if we also bring seek clarity on cities' recommitment to equity, there is a pretty big focus on the trainee program, which I think is valuable, but does that overemphasize? It's the second paragraph of the seek clarity on cities' recommitment to equity. If we bump that to the top, does it seem like we're encouraging that the trainee program is one of the most important things we're focusing on? It feels like that might be overemphasizing it in the overall flow.
I think we're going to move that entire section that falls under prioritize equity to the top. Cool. Does that make sense?
It does.
Is that what you were asking? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So I hear your concern, Kyle, because because we could move the intergenerational equity piece up and come up with different section titles and come back to the seeking council clarity on commitment to equity later in the letter, because otherwise it might be disjointed having that in between this section and the section prior to it that's all about the rates and infrastructure. So we can work out that flow and figure out whether it makes sense to move that whole section or just the intergenerational equity piece and then come back to it.
I'm in agreement with that, Amy. It's exactly what was just described. I like intergenerational equity. It's like 2 paragraphs. It's like principles, values, then all of like the actual like kind of deep dive policy and budget stuff, and then the trainee program, because it just, that feels like a good prioritization.
It's kind of like the why we care about it. Here's the things that are happening that, or the what are happening to the why. And then here's what we think should happen next. Does that make sense in terms of flow? Okay.
Before releasing to Lorraine, just one, I can send these over your way, Amy and Jonah directly, but in that seek clarity on cities' recommitment to equity, the trainee program, there are a couple of typos I saw. They're minor, but I can send them over just to clean up the document.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, Lorraine, go ahead.
Hi, thanks everyone. 10, 20, 30. Oh, yes. I'm loving all that I'm hearing. And I just wanted to say that what is the one thing that we want council to take away? As a pub, what is the one thing?
Lorraine, you're cutting out a bit. I can't hear you.
Quite supportive of the letter being long. Are you hearing me better now?
Yeah, that's great. We cut out.
Can you hear me better?
Yes, that's great. Can you
repeat away from my source?
Can
you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Hello?
Oh, shoot.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you all. You hearing me now?
Yes, we can hear you fine. But you cut out. Could you repeat like the last 10
Yeah,
seconds?
I moved away from my source. I'm not apologizing. I'm heading to the beach.
Good for you. Absolutely.
The one thing that we want to take, what do we want council to take away? What's the one thing? Because as we know, people only have a limited amount of times. And I love all that's in the letter that I've seen it, because it's saying who we are, what we've done, what we have accomplished, what we are about. What is the one thing that we want to see first and foremost if somebody picks this up and starts scanning it and read probably the first 2 paragraphs? What is the one thing as pub that we want council to take away and is impactful for them to know, hey, oh, this is pub and this is what they've been doing and this is what they're about and here's why it's important what they're doing and what changes can we support, or what are the things that we need to take into consideration, or what is the thing that we need to take into consideration as a council with regard to this advisory committee who has been in the trenches and know this, know what is happening with utilities and rates and all these kind of things. So that is the only input I have.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a great question. Julia, do you want to go first?
Well, I mean, I was hoping that Lorraine would flesh out what her recommendation would be for what that one thing is, because I would love your input and direction on that to help advise the commission on how we pick literally just one thing. So yeah, I would love to get, if you could flesh out your thinking about what you would like to see, I would be really helpful.
And I've been hearing some of it is that, of course, especially with the political environment now, we need to be clear. And I've heard that said, bring that equity focus up and front, right? Because we need to, that's who we are. And I remember for the last few months, I've been like, if we are not aligned, and we need to say that somewhere, that, hey, this is who we are. And this is why our role as a public utility board, what matters to us is that we ensure that the most impacted communities are taken care of when we are looking at rates and all these different things. And I think that is support that is there, and how we communicate it, because some people, I'm not accusing anybody, once they hear equity, and especially now DI or whatever, they turn off. So how do we frame that in a way that it's impactful, that they understand here is why we as a utility board are grounded in equity and equitable outcomes for communities who have been harmed by city government. And I'm quite comfortable with those wording. Who has been harmed by city government? Because I don't like the tradition, who have been historically been impacted, blah blah blah. When people being harmed, we need to be careful sometimes how we prettying up the language, right? City government has caused harm, and what we are about is when we look at how we look at the information that we gather and how we propose rate increase that is grounded in that, is that we are aware as a board that the city has harmed communities, specific communities. And this is what we are looking for, and this is how what we are proposing will serve everyone. So I just wanted to share that. I don't know if that clarifies it for you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Yeah, that's really helpful. So what I'm hearing, we want to reiterate that our role as pub is we are, despite the federal political climate, or I mean any climate, we're here to advocate for equity and justice. Okay, Kyle, would you like to go next?
Totally. It feels to me a sentiment that is echoed throughout the document, and some way to kind of sync it up is that deferred investment or sacrificed vacancies in service of addressing short-term budget shortfalls create cascading long-term incur greater costs in the long term, with the heaviest cost being laid at the feet of those most vulnerable communities. So it's trying to save a couple bucks now, which it costs way much more, both in monetary and human capital.
Thanks.
I don't, specifically to Lorraine's point on city government harming folks, I believe, I do not have any insight into it. So I would like to just research to get, like, as we approach and as we incorporate that kind of messaging, to get very specific. And then we can, in the same way that this document has some really great specificity on the types of, like, how general fund does and does not interweave throughout rate increases, and where that burden of cost ends up falling. I want to become more educated to understand where harm has occurred, and then present that as part of our messaging as well. So I am in support and concert with Lorraine, and I'd like to learn more.
Thanks, Kyle. Julia, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I would like to respond to all of that a little bit. I agree. Like, I think broadly speaking, particularly the city has absolutely caused harm to a number of communities. But if we're going to make a harm statement, it needs to be grounded really specifically in our wheelhouse, you know? So I think we need to be really grounded in what we mean when we say that. I also think we can frame up the impacts of some of these decisions will cause future harm for sure. And like, I think that's language that we should not shy away from. So I'm in agreement with like not softballing these how we frame up harm. So I appreciate that input, but I agree about needing to ground it in specifics since we are a really fairly narrowly focused entity. And the other thing, I mean, what I was taking away from the request that we focus on one thing, I feel like the one thing we focus on does need to be like, you know, concrete or outcome oriented. And that's why I'm wondering, because I feel like it doesn't matter if they get that the one thing we really want is for equity to be taken seriously if we're not being consulted in a timely manner and our advice taken into account in an impactful way before decisions are made, right? So to me, that's feeling kind of take home is, you know, we are prioritizing, you know, like harm reduction to our communities, especially if the decisions that are being made today on, you know, budget cuts. They're going to have these kinds of impacts to communities and that like really negative, harmful impacts on these communities in the future. And we need to be, in order to fulfill our obligation as an as a you know, as the pub, we need to be engaged in these decisions and how these things happen and our input taken seriously and into account before these decisions are made. Because I feel like that's kind of the broken record message we've been sending for years is we are not fulfilling our role because we are not being engaged substantially early on in these processes. And by the time we're weighing in, decisions have already been made, and that's a problem. So to me, that feels like we're grounding it in the equity problem, but the like concrete, here's what we're asking for is that we are engaged in these decision-making processes before the decisions have been made, and that those decisions therefore will be more grounded in these values of equity and harm reduction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks, Julia. I would agree with that, that our one thing is that we are asking that equity is at the core of all decision making and that we are a part of that process to help advocate for vulnerable communities and voicing systemic inequities, right? Thanks. Yeah, Alexis, could your hands up too.
Yeah, I just want to echo +1 to everything that has been said so far. I agree with the with these other with my fellow members comments here, especially on like the future harm that these short-term decisions are causing. And then on this, so to answer Lorraine's original question around like what is the one like most important thing, I'm hearing that one is like we want them to understand that what the long-term impacts are of this. So we're asking for understanding. We're asking to be engaged in a substantial way. And then I think that we need the like, and therefore please come to our meeting, or like we request a meeting with, like I feel like we should offer some recommendations and suggestions on what being engaged substantially means and what that looks like, and then what, and like the specific ask that we have there, because it's one thing, right, to, and I think it's critical, like the important thing that we want them to take away from this is, but in order to be able to be substantially engaged, does that mean that they need to come to we're asking for someone from council to come to one of our meetings so that we can have like a conversation about this. We'd like to hear your reactions to what we're proposing here and what our specific asks and requests are, so that then we can have like an honest conversation with you about what this means and understand it more. But I think like the ask needs about how to be engaged should be really strong. And here in the first paragraph, like these 3 bullets, it should be one of those.
Thanks. Yeah, I agree, Alexis. And there's some down in the next steps and opportunities for engagement on that, but I agree that there should be one concise like bullet point that's like, this is what we stand for, and here's how you can engage with us. Lorraine, I saw your hand up. Did you mean to put it down or?
No, I put my hand up.
Okay.
So I am liking all that I'm hearing about the conversation. Yeah, so that. However, I just want to address one issue. I am one of the 92%. So when I tell you all I'm on the beach and heading to the beach, I mean it. I do not intend to labor anymore. So when I say that the city government has caused harm, I am concerned that it's being nickel and dime. Google it, redlining. Let's talk about East Portland and why East Portland is one of the deserts in Portland. Why the infrastructure in East Portland is in such poor condition compared, I'm doing labor here now, even though I say I'm not doing it, compared to the West Side. Let's go on and talk about Albina. Let's talk about what the state and city did to destroy that Black neighborhood. Let's talk about William in whatever, William Street or whatever in Portland. Let's talk about that. I could go down the list, but as I tell you, I am the 92%. And you all will be watching social media and you see the 92% is not taking on this lever anymore. So I just wanted to come in here and say, I support what the letter says. But when I say that we should talk about the historical harm that the city of Portland has done to communities of color, specifically Black communities, I am concerned that you all are nickel and diming on it and how we should say it, because if we want to get into politics, when the Republicans wanted to get rid of abortion, they did it. They didn't nickel and dime on it. And they're still going after it. And they're persisting in it. But for some reason, we think that we have to incrementally do things and make things sound nice and make it sound favorable because, oh, we don't want to mess with anybody's head. And I'm not here to be antagonistic or whatever, but let the truth be said. And the truth is that the city of Portland has caused harm to specifically Black communities and other communities of color. And I want that to be on the record. And this is talk coming from this member of the 92%. And I just wanted to share that.
Julie, if I can jump ahead of you, I just want to make one response to Lorraine's thought. I grew up in Chicago. I know the history of redlining in Chicago. It is heinous. It carved out communities and future generations, and I despise it. I say that because my comments, I do not know the history of harm in the city of Portland. So it's not discrediting or devaluing the lived experience and disinvestment. It is specifically my own ignorance as it relates to the generation of a document. So thank you for clearly stating in defined terms. And I have lived in my own lived community in the past. I've seen the ugliness carried out with generational intent. So I support us working together. Thank you, Lorraine.
Thanks, both of you. Appreciate that input. That's powerful. Julia, your response.
Oh yeah, no, I just wanted to acknowledge that I am in no way interested in nickel and diming the definition of harms that Portland government has caused to particularly the Black community, the way that literally they were paved over by a freeway and paved over by a hospital, in very targeted ways. The comment I was making earlier was about feeling that we were obligated to highlight the harms as defined by the area that we cover. But I'm realizing that, you know, there is a way for us to couch the area that we cover within that systemic, you know, harm creating, you know, machine, if you will. So I think I don't in any way want to belittle that point, nor do I want to challenge that reality. I did grow up here. I did a case study in college on the Albina community. It's the historic wrongs are very real. I mean, Vanport, I mean, right. The list goes on and on. So I just think we need to, I want to make sure that if we're going to bring up something that broad, that that it makes sense contextually in the letter, but in no way do I think we should be diminishing or not being honest about harms caused by this government. And if that was how that suggestion came off, I do apologize. That was not my intention, Lorraine.
Thanks, Julie. Appreciate that. Maybe that's a piece of our one thing is acknowledging the harms that have already been done and working to prevent those for future generations. Okay, that was really meaningful conversation. Thanks everyone for your input. Do we have anything else that we want to add to this front matter? These are our main points to start off with. Any other comments there before we move on? Okay, if no comments, I think just in the interest of time, Amy, should we maybe, since there have been a lot of comments on calls to action, maybe we can work through the next steps and engagement before we wrap up.
Yeah, Lauren, that sounds great. So going back to, so I struggled in this section with either asking specific questions or requests versus so this is what it evolved into, but it could take several different forms. I think we want to be realistic about like where the opportunities for engagement have the potential to be the most impactful and likely to happen. So I've heard the request or the potential request to invite to specific pub meeting, which I have in here towards the end as a general statement, not a specific ask, because I just strictly, you know, I think the more logistical and administrative side kicks in, where I know from past engagement with elected officials, it took meetings to prepare for that engagement and plan what, you know, was going to be the conversation. And at that point had specifically designated representatives on council to be that liaison to the pub. So it's a little more challenging when there's 12 of them, and you know, having one of them come would be meaningful, but really you need to have engagement with some of the committees or the full council in a way that could lead to impact on the decisions that they're going to be making. So I think that's just where I struggled with, was with what the specific ask would be. And so it could go either way. I mean, if having them come to your space to engage is what you feel is most important, then, we could lay out specifically when that could be, or a time frame, or how, what it might look like, or whether you're asking for individual council members to come. So I'd like to hear more just from the broad group about what some of those specific engagement opportunities might look like, either individual meetings or committee meetings or work session. In the past, PUB has had work sessions with full council, and that might look different in the future, particularly if it is with a specific committee like the infrastructure committee or something like that.
Thanks, Amy. And I would like to give others the opportunity to speak, of course, but I think spelling out these areas is really helpful of things that we want to be involved in. I think it could just be as simple as changing up the language a little bit so that it's more direct and asking what we're looking for. And I think it's kind of hard at least for me, I would like to hear from others too, but to understand how to be engaged because of the restructuring. So even something as simple as like, the last sentence of the first paragraph, it says areas where we're eager to engage. You could even just say, these are areas where we would like your guidance on how to engage. So we're asking for collaboration. We're not just saying we want to collaborate. We're saying, please collaborate with us. And to some degree. Yeah, Julia, please go ahead.
I was just curious if we do have a liaison city council member. I serve on another commission, and we have like a point person on the commission. And I apologize if this has been announced before and I missed it. I know I've been a little bit out of the loop.
Not that I'm aware of.
Well, that's kind of disappointing. Not a great sign either. Okay.
Yeah. That's a good idea, Julia. I mean, that could even be something in here that's like one of our calls to action is like, so we say identifying how to engage. We could even just say, I don't know, identifying a point of contact or identifying with whom to engage. I think this is really well written in terms of what we're looking for, but I think just changing some of the language a little to make it a direct ask could be super helpful.
I agree. I think we should, I think it speaks volumes about how seriously they're taking us, that they haven't assigned a council person to be our point person. So we should be directly asking for that for sure. And it's kind of like not cool that we have to ask for that. But anyway, like, yeah, we should be very specific about that ask.
Okay, that's a great input. Thank you. I'm curious from some of the other PUB members, is there anything specific that we would like to ask from council?
I wonder, just based on what this is Amy, one suggestion is and maybe it's under the budget development and rate setting, or it's connected to this identifying a point person with council. I mentioned that, actually code says that PUB has a work session with council, and that hasn't happened for some years because of COVID and priorities and changes in council. And then it happened in different forms, engaging directly with a commissioner who was the point. But I wonder if, one of the ideas put out there is a work session with the infrastructure committee, if that it seems like is one of the primary points for public works, and that maybe that's what it could evolve into as a productive. The difference about a work session is that it's a dialogue back and forth. So you share what your priorities and work plan are, and the intent of that is to be engaging directly with those council members to hear feedback and see what they think about those, and for them to give some direction. So that has been the intent in the past. So maybe it's time to try to revive that, but find the right venue, maybe the infrastructure committee being one of those.
I
Yeah,
like
that's
that a lot. I think that's a great direct ask to include in the letter, honestly.
agreed. And I saw thumbs up from Julia and Alexis. So I think there is agreement there that we could ask for, a direct ask for a work session to kind of figure out what engagement looks like. And even, this last bullet point, effective engagement with leadership, being invited to engage directly. Give us a list. Where are some opportunities where we can speak or we can collaborate? I think, in general, just being direct, those direct asks are a really good idea. Thanks, Amy.
Hi, this is Mally. I'm a pub voting member. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep my camera off today. I'm not feeling very good. But I wanted to, gauge the group's interest on this. When we received notice about the changing of the funding for each department, it was notated how the police bureau was not going to be receiving much of a reduction in their operating budgets, but every other department was. Do we feel comfortable notating anything about that? Like this, Water Bureau and BES provide public services that are for the good of the community. Not saying that the police department doesn't, but it's jarring to see how that division is not seeing a reduction in their in their budget whatsoever, while other services are. Is that within our scope that we want to comment on that, especially since the police bureau has historically contributed to things that we as a city especially don't want to withstand. We have our anti-racist principles, and it's jarring, to see that they're not getting a reduction in cost. So just wanted to run that by everyone, see if that was of interest to anyone to notate in our letter.
I'm curious to hear some others' thoughts. Thanks for bringing that up, Melly. I wasn't aware or I didn't recognize that. So I think that is something I'm not familiar enough about it, but I think that is something that we could bring up for sure. Just to highlight the importance of the services that Water Bureau and BES provide.
I would frame it up as public health too, we're such a public health benefit.
Yeah.
I would also like to frame it up as if there's supposed to be across the board cuts, this is not equitable, right? You know what I mean? Yeah, I'm just thinking about how do we frame it up in a way that is relevant to the context of the letter and not just but I think there's a way to do it. And I'm glad you brought it up.
Same. I think it's important that we highlight, and a couple of years ago when we redid some sort of statement, now I can't remember what it was, but where we talked about how water is a human right and it's critical, to the health and well-being of the community. And and now I'm forgetting how much we've emphasized that in here. But I think that framing around this is a public service that's really critical to health and well-being is really is something that that we could point to, and that we're concerned about seeing these services on the chopping block when we're not seeing that for other departments and bureaus.
I like that framing.
Same.
So, trying to figure out how to, I Yeah, I guess maybe I need to work offline with folks on how to incorporate that in a way that doesn't, I think it can be an important message. It also could distract because I know that there's a lot of conversation that's going to happen at the council level related to that, because I think what's been recommended has not been some of those public safety cuts that are on the table, but that those are under discussion because as the financial picture moves forward, the gap is still really substantial. And so they're going to be having some pretty deep discussions about that. But again, that's the general fund side of things. And so the rate decisions are very separate from that. And so it could just bring in a level of complexity that might distract from the rest of the message.
That's a good point, Amy. I wonder if it's something that we don't need to bring up an entirely new point, but maybe just mention it in, I don't have it pulled up, but one of these concerns about the budget cuts, we could just mention in there something along the lines of how these public services are disproportionately being impacted by budget cuts, as opposed to some other services that are not being impacted. And we could argue these are arguably, I mean, I guess more important is not the right way to say it, but at least, like I think Alexis said, like clean water is a right, and we should be protecting that.
I think that kind of more indirect framing feels safer, honestly, especially given our audience and who we're trying to reach. I don't, but it's also acknowledging that reality. So yeah, I like that framing.
So just being wary of time, are there any more comments? Is anybody specifically feeling like this needs more work other than what was discussed today? Amy, are you feeling like we're getting close? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so given the time, we no longer have quorum, so we can't reach a formal decision, but I'll work as far as next steps. We, as staff, will work on the notes that we have from today, some that I've commented here and just been taking notes while we're speaking, and work on some of the revisions and a revised version of the letter. And then we'll connect with the chairs regarding next steps, because we can move forward based on whatever timing makes sense. We do have one more meeting that if we had a quorum at, we could finalize a letter. It would be a short time frame then for council to have received it just less than a week prior to that meeting, but that's one option. Or the chairs can review it themselves and see if it aligns with what was discussed and finalize it and sign it as chairs on behalf of the pub. So I'll coordinate with them both on that piece, and then we can decide how to move forward. So meanwhile, we will work on the revised version of this letter. We'll also work on the draft talking points with some of the emphasis that was discussed today, and can hone that a little bit further at the next meeting before the April 7th. So we will be seeking volunteers. I know there's only a few of you left on the call right now, so we'll make sure that we put word out to the rest of the group. We do have the results from the survey, and I think we have a lot of members who are pretty tapped for time in these couple months. So we'll figure out those next steps, but start identifying who the speakers may be so that we make sure that we're also drafting it in a way that fits with their tone and presentation as well. Jonalyn, you had your hand up?
Nope.
Oh, okay. Let me get back to the slides. Hold on just a moment. All right, so we will skip over. Oh. All right, so I guess I was just talking through that, but those are our plans for the next step. So again, the next key dates are you'll have an April 1st meeting and then the April 7th committees, both infrastructure and finance, and then the rate hearing. So we will be working on that. And we didn't get a lot of feedback. Jonalyn compiled the information from surveys. We haven't heard from quite everybody. I think we only had one member who had a few connections with individual council members. So we can also talk at the next meeting about whether there's interest in some direct contact with council members, whether it's for the districts that you participate in, or particularly some of those that are relevant to the infrastructure committee. Julia.
I do have relationships on the council, and I think I just am like behind on being responsive to requests you're sending out. Possibly, could you resend to me, like whatever, however it is you're tracking our relationships? Because this is something I would like to try to do, although my schedule is really tight. But it's like I would like to try to, you know, work with the relevant elected officials that I have relationships with if I can.
Yeah, that'd be great. And in the past, often what we've done is, you know, depending on people's comfort, I think because of the work that you do and your engagement with elected officials, probably you don't need much. Some others may want a little bit more. Usually we just have more like very short bullet points of here's a few of the key messages that we hope to get across, as opposed to like in-depth talking points, because those may be brief phone calls or an email, or, you know, that's really in your personal voice as one of the pub members, but still just trying to emphasize it with anybody that you have as a representative or direct contact. We will resend that to you.
Perfect. Thank you. It'll help me prioritize it. And then I can just let you know who I'm reaching out to so you can, for tracking purposes.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
And I lost track of time because I was in the middle of it all. And so I realized that we are short. So Jonalyn, do you want to take the lead on the recruitment stuff? And
Yeah. Basically this is we need to kind of start moving forward on recruitment. We're a little bit behind this year where we want to be. So composition of pub, we have 11 voting members, of which we have 3 current vacancies. So 2 of those are community members, as you're aware. For folks who may have missed it, Chris, our labor representative, had to resign from the committee because he was promoted into a non-represented role. And so we do have those 3 vacancies, as well as some upcoming. So we have one person whose term is expiring and she is not eligible for reappointment. That's Karen, because this will be 6 years of service for Karen. And then we have 2 folks whose terms are expiring and are interested in reappointment. So if you could move to thank you. So basically our goals for today, really quickly, making a decision on reappointment. And then if we could, we may not have time for a discussion on identifying skills or experience, but we'll ask for you all to think about what skills and experience you want to kind of add to the board. So it could be what we have already had in the previous postings, which you did get in read ahead. And if you missed it, please let me know. I'm happy to send that again. And then if you all would be willing to empower pub staff, Amy and me, to actually take the next steps on recruitment so that we can get started on the front end stuff, even if we don't have a subcommittee constituted yet. Although if we could identify some volunteers for a subcommittee, that would be fabulous. For this year, again, those two members, if we could get agreement to go ahead and seek the reappointment of those two members whose terms are expiring and are eligible. For this year, as pub staff, we think it makes sense to go ahead and do that because we do have other vacancies. So we will be able to get some fresh perspective on pub, but also kind of maintaining some of that continuity and institutional memory. It can be really valuable, especially with all of the change that's been happening on pub or not just in pub, sorry, with the governmental transition and all of that. I don't know if we could just get thumbs up or
and I realize now, because we've had some members drop off, that we don't have quorum. So
okay, yeah,
it would be great if people are generally supportive, but really we're at, because either way, if we're going to get announcement out, we're going to have to do it pretty soon. So it's another item that we'll review with the co-chairs and figure out whether to hold for the next meeting or to draft materials and just seek some of your input via email. So we will work on that in the next week and try to get some more information out to you all. But since we don't have a quorum, we can't reach a formal decision, but at least wanted you all to understand from our staff perspective what has worked well in the past. And usually we've considered reappointments with other applicants, but we haven't typically had as many vacancies as we have during such a unique time where some of that historical perspective is pretty hard to replace. So
yeah. And the other thing that I kind of want to make sure that we leave you with for today is just as staff understanding, like Amy said, that you all are stretched pretty thin already. We would like to do our best to minimize the time commitment for anyone who is participating on the committee, or on the subcommittee. In the last year, Amy got some really, really good feedback about how that process went. And I don't know, Amy, given the time limitations, I'm not sure you want to speak to that, but basically, if we could get a few people to help, we will sort of be able to do a lot of the front end stuff on our staff. And then much of the work apart from that would be asynchronous. So something you could do on your own time, not necessarily have to schedule a meeting ahead of time. And then we might only need to meet one time to make recommendations. So anyway, that's kind of what we wanted to emphasize for this. Alexis?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, as someone who participated on the recruitment subcommittee last year, that Amy made it so easy for us, and also like a meaningful way. It felt like we were able to like review applicants and consider, right, who would be well positioned to join the pub, like in a really efficient and effective way. So just for others who may be considering it, I thought that the process last year went really, really well.
Thank you for that, Alexis. And again, looking at the time, we've got about one more minute. Are there, I don't know that there were announcements, Amy, that are really important to,
No, we can,
highlight.
we'll send information out by email and yeah, we'll just plan with the chairs for the next meeting to continue the budget conversation and other updates that are relevant, and we will let folks know. Do be watching for the recruitment information and any skills or experience that you feel are important to highlight beyond what is already in the draft, because if that changes how we're doing outreach to people, then we want to try to integrate that in absence of having a subcommittee meeting. We just want to make sure that we've heard from some pub members. So be looking for something from Jonalyn soon. And with that, I think we've reached
Right on time.
Thank you, everybody.